The battlefield is silent. Not the silence of peace, the silence of suspended catastrophe. Two armies facing each other across a field at dawn, horses trembling, conches not yet sounded. And in that liminal pause, on a chariot drawn to the center of no man's land, a warrior has collapsed. His bow has slipped from his fingers. His body shakes. This is the setting in which one of the most careful psychological documents in the Sanskrit tradition unfolds. A conversation that begins in crisis and ends 18 chapters and 700 verses later in the quietest possible word, love. The text is the Bhagavad Gita, found in the Bhishma Parva of the Mahabharata, traditionally attributed to the sage Veda Vyasa, though historiographically regarded as a composite work, likely composed somewhere between the 5th century and the 1st century BCE. Scholars differ, and both dates deserve acknowledgement. The battlefield is Kurukshetra in present-day Haryana, but the Gita's opening verse doubles the field's identity immediately, calling it both Dharmakshetra and Kurukshetra, the field of righteousness and the field of action, establishing at the outset that the outer war is also an inner one. The student is Arjuna, the third Pandava, son of Kunti, born of the god Indra. The teacher is Krishna, his cousin, his closest friend, and for the duration of this dialogue, his charioteer. The relationship matters. Krishna is not a remote deity issuing commands. He is the Sakha, the companion, the one who knows Arjuna well enough to ride beside him without speaking until Arjuna speaks first. That intimacy is not incidental. It is, as we will see, the very medium of the teaching. Krishna moves through doctrine carefully across the Gita's arc. Karma Yoga first, the discipline of desireless action. Then jnana, self-knowledge. And then, gathering momentum after verse 630, something more intimate than either. By chapter 12, the teaching arrives at what the tradition calls bhakti-yoga. The word bhakti derives from the Sanskrit root bhaj, to share, to partake, to participate. Monier Williams in the Standard Dhatu text confirm this derivation. An alternative etymology from bhuj, meaning to consume or partake in, is sometimes offered, but bhaj is the scholarly consensus. What this etymology tells us immediately is that bhakti is not passive sentiment, it is participatory. It is the act of entering into relationship. There is no single English word for it. Devotion captures part of it. Love captures another part. But bhakti includes a quality of deep, unselfish affection, distinct from wish, which the tradition calls selfish, and from mere ritual compliance, which can exist without any inner movement at all. Chapter 12 opens with a question from Arjuna. In the IAST rendering from the Stotra Nidhi, Evam satata yukta ye bhakta stvam paryupasate. Ye cha pyaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yogavittamaha. Arjuna asks, those who worship you with perpetual devotion, and those who worship the imperishable and the unmanifest, which of these has the better knowledge of yoga? This is the Saguna-Nirguna question, the question of personal versus impersonal worship, that has occupied Indian philosophy for centuries. Arjuna poses it not combatively, but with genuine curiosity. He has already traversed 11 chapters of difficult doctrine. His question here is the question of a student who is almost ready. He just needs the last door pointed out. Krishna answers in verse 12:2. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Maya Vaishyam Mano Ye, Mam Nitya Yukta Upasate, Shraddhaya Parayopetaste Me Yukta Tamamataha. The blessed Lord said, those who fixing their minds on me, worship me with perpetual devotion, endowed with supreme faith, these I consider to be the most perfect in yoga. The key word is Shraddha, faith, but not blind faith. Shraddha in Sanskrit carries the sense of heart-placed trust, conviction that has been earned through inner turning. And the word yukta tamaha, most perfectly joined, comes from the same root as yoga itself, yuj, to unite. The devotee of personal form is, in Krishna's declaration, the most deeply united. Then immediately in verse 12:5, Krishna explains why, not by dismissing the impersonal path, but by acknowledging its difficulty honestly. Klesho adhikataras tesham avyakta saktachetasam. Avyakta hi gatir dukham dehavad biravapyate. Greater is the trouble of those whose minds are set on the unmanifest, for the goal of the unmanifest is hard to attain by embodied beings. The word klesha here is worth pausing over. It means suffering, affliction, the grinding quality of a path that asks the human mind, which is, by its nature, relational, image-making, drawn toward faces and forms, to fix itself on pure abstraction. Krishna is not saying the nirguna path is wrong. He is saying that for beings housed in bodies, with nervous systems attuned to relationship and presence, the personal path is more accessible. This is a psychological observation as much as a theological one. Consider what it means for an ordinary life. A woman in her 60s, sitting beside her dying mother in a hospital room. She does not reach for abstraction. She reaches for the one face she has known her whole life, the one hand she can still hold. The approach to the sacred through a face, through a relationship, through something she can return to when the mind dissolves in grief. This is not a lesser spirituality. The Gita is saying it may in fact be the most human and therefore the most practical entry point into the deepest discipline. Krishna closes chapter 12 by describing what the devotee who has walked this path actually looks like. And this description, across verses 12:13 to 12:20, is one of the most psychologically dense passages in the entire Gita. The IAST of verses 13 and 14, verified against the shlokam.org and Stotra Nidhi renderings. Adveshta sarvabhutanam maitra karuna evaka, nirmamo nirahankara samadukha sukha kshami, santushta satatam yogi yatatma dritha nishchaya. Mayarpita manobuddhir yo madbhakta same priya. He who has no ill will to any being, who is friendly and compassionate, free from I-ness and mine-ness, equal in pain and pleasure, forbearing, ever content, self-controlled, of firm resolve, with mind and intellect dedicated to me, that devotee of mine is dear to me. Notice what is not on this list. Not ritual purity, not intellectual achievement, not renunciation of worldly life. The portrait is almost entirely relational and dispositional. Adveshta, free from enmity, maitra, genuinely friendly, karuna, compassionate, nirmamo, without possessiveness, nirahankara, without the hardened shell of ego. This is bhakti as character formation. Devotion practiced over time produces a specific kind of human being. The Bhagavata Purana gives us the other great document of bhakti psychology, and it gives it through an extraordinary character. In Skanda 7, Adhyaya 5, verse 23, a child named Prahlada speaks to his father. The father is Hiranyakashipu, the demon king. Hiranyakashipu has asked his son to recite what he has learned from his teachers. What Prahlada offers is the ninefold taxonomy of devotional practice. Navadha Bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Shmaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam Sakyamatma Nivedanam. Listening, praising, remembering, serving at the feet, worshipping an image, paying homage, servitude, friendship, and finally, Atmanivedanam, complete surrender of the self. This verse is quoted by a child to a man who will shortly attempt to have him killed for it. That context is not decorative. Prahlada has been subjected to repeated torture at the order of his own father. Fire, serpents, trampling by elephants, exposure to the elements. And through all of it, his smarana, his practice of remembrance, has not broken. The Bhagavata Purana is making a precise claim. Bhakti is not a feeling that arises when conditions are favorable. It is a discipline that holds under maximum pressure, precisely because its anchor is not circumstance, but interior orientation. Think of a person who has watched their closest friendships slowly go cold. Years of closeness ending not in a single rupture, but in unreturned messages, in a voice that used to call weekly and now is simply absent. The grief of that is particular, and it has no ceremony. What sustains a person through that kind of invisible loss is not analysis of what went wrong. It is some practice of return, something to come back to that is more stable than the shifting surface of any relationship. Prahlada's Smarana is precisely that, a practice of return so deeply established that even his father's violence cannot reach it. The Narada Bhakti Sutra, attributed to the sage Narada, consisting of 84 aphoristic sutras, opens with a deceptively simple declaration. Atta bhaktin vyakyasyama. Now devotion shall be explained. This single word, atta, now, carries enormous weight in Sanskrit scriptural openings. It signals readiness, the student prepared to receive. And what Narada proceeds to explain, in the sutra that follows, Sa tu asmin parama prema rupa, is that bhakti is the form of supreme love. Not an instrument toward liberation, not a preparatory stage to be discarded when wisdom arrives. Love itself as the final form. This is where Narada parts ways with one long-standing position in the tradition. The view that bhakti is only an intermediate step, useful for purifying the heart, but ultimately superseded by jnana. The Bhagavad Gita's 18th chapter directly addresses this. At verse 1854, Brahma bhuta prasannatma, na shochati na kankshati, sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate param. Serene in the self, neither grieving nor desiring, the same to all beings, one then attains supreme devotion to me. This is para bhakti, transcendent love, appearing not before Brahman realization, but after it. The sequence is the argument. Even the jnani, having dissolved into pure awareness, arrives there. Shankara and the Vaishnava commentators, Ramanuja, Madhva, Vishwanatha Chakravarti, interpret this differently. For Shankara, this final bhakti remains consistent with Advaita self-knowledge. For the Vaishnava schools, it is a distinct transcendental love, qualitatively beyond knowledge. The text holds the tension without resolving it. And that irresolution may be part of the teaching. What to carry forward into your actual day? The Gita's architecture of bhakti is built on a single premise, that love, practiced with discipline and without possessiveness, is not a shortcut around the harder paths, but their culmination. The description in Chapter 12 of the ideal devotee is not a list of achievements. It is a portrait of a person who has, over time, been changed by practice, less defended, more present, capable of compassion that does not depend on return. The word adveshta, no ill will toward any being, is the first quality listed. Not ecstasy, not vision, simply the gradual dissolution of hostility toward what is alive. That is where the discipline begins, and perhaps also where it ends. The bow can be picked up again.